Great. No, good. No problem. There's still work going on over here. We could tell that there was some lively discussions, and we could have continued. So it's very encouraging to see that. So thank you for participating actively. I think the quality of the discussion was quite nice to see. In each of the groups, whether it was bigger groups or smaller groups, people were energized to contribute their ideas. So that was an objective of our day for today. So thank you for participating. Okay. Now, let's hear what you have to say, and if we want to applaud after. I'm sure we will. Okay, so do you want to step up? All right.
Hi. Oh, the light is really bright. Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Castillo. I'm from Mexico City. I work for the mayor's office at City Hall. And the group that I was in is open data portals and engagement mechanisms. Personally, I went there because we were very interested in promoting and engaging users on the portal that we just recently launched in Mexico City, which is for open contracting. And very interestingly, we had a very diverse group. We had people from that were from CSOs, other people from government, data analysts, techies and non-techies. And what we were discussing is first that it's very important to see or spot who is a user for the data that you have, or in our case, for the portal. And after defining, sorry, I wanted to see my notes. After defining who the user is prioritizing, if you have a different list of users, who is at the top of that priority list for the users. After that, we really discussed on how we can engage those users, because we had different methodologies, or we had different experiences on how we were reaching out to our users. And even though some strategies weren't the best ones, and maybe we had second doubts about them, we saw that it was an experience, we learned from them, and then we can share those experiences with others so that they can engage their own users. And what we saw is from the different types of users is that maybe from academia, it's as easy as reaching out to teachers and making sure that they put open data on their syllabus, or talking to students about open data and what they can use it for. Also for businesses, we could reach out to businessmen that may be interested in the use of open data, but they don't have the resources themselves to develop an app. So maybe they can fund an event or a hackathon where other people who know how to use the open data can make it work. And also, we were really saying that it's very important for any tools that be developed from the open data that we want people to use to be license-free or completely open. And making sure also that you're updating your data frequently enough, and that it has a great quality. Otherwise, it's going to be a turnoff for the people that are using your data, or that you have persuaded to use your data. And I think in general, there was a great tagline that we had in the end, which is think about your strategy, decide on it, and own it, do it, and evaluate so that you can keep learning and keep engaging different users. So that's it.
Thank you. Great job. Excellent. Is there anything that the people that were in that group would like to add that wasn't mentioned? Maybe some burning issues that weren't captured? Maybe you covered everything, which is great, but I just want to give the opportunity for the members of that group if there's anything else that you want to raise. If not, we can just move on. You did it. Great. Okay. Who's going to present for the Open Data Charter? Anna.
All right, before I give the takeaways, I want to ask something I didn't ask at the beginning. How many people know what the Open Data Charter is? Okay, so more of you should have been at my session. All right, so that's half the room. So we know it's a set of principles, right? And these can be overlapping, and they're about supporting open data at a national level, but also subnational level, and that's why I'm here today to talk about city adoption. So in our group, what we realized is that people don't even know that the Charter has a technical working group. So this is not all about just policy, it's about bringing in the technical people together with the government people and the policymakers to bring this all full circle and take step forward in terms of adoption and what does this mean for the users and the people who are applying these portals and methods together. So in terms of what we realized again is that it's still early on, so the charter is almost a year old now. There's a need to create a pipeline and to have for the maturity model over time that will be there, and the technical participants in our group really kind of said CCAN is really the way to go. It has a critical mass and it should be adopted. We should have portals that are centralized, and we really need versioning system to provide the text available. So really, it's about usability, it's about open formats, but it's also about the need for experts here to provide the quality assurance. So just because we have the data sets and they're perfect and machine readable and human readable, but we don't have the actual sector experts involved, then how do we know that data's quality? How do we know that we're visualizing things with CCAN that are relevant to those communities? We also need to have tech guidelines that release open data, because we know it's a political issue and we want to be careful about how we frame that, but at the same time we want to remain open. And what do we do about newcomers? We realize in this space we have a lot of text, but not a lot of storytelling, not a lot of visuals, and we need to really work on that as well. And maybe taking this next year, we can have another focus group on what we think about the principles, their actions, what makes sense for a government to adopt this, what makes sense for a technical team to take this to their government to adopt this. And at the end of the day, we kind of went back to the basics and realized that anything is better than nothing, sadly, when we combine these spaces, because it's a very new thing we're putting together. So we need to take small steps to carry that forward. And we also recognize the challenges that if we do have open data champions in some governments and even on a municipal level, then we already know that we already have an open data policy. Why would we want to adopt the charter? So asking these kind of hard questions and seeing what can work for certain governments that are already champions and giving them the flexibility to endorse it rather than adopt it should be something that we should discuss. And I would like to bring Antonio up to give a few words about the working group on the subnational level.
Thank you. I think it's been a very interesting experience. The dynamic that they proposed was very interesting. Basically, the charter is built on 6 principles, and each principle has some actions, recommended actions for cities. But actually, when you look at the charter, I think it's still too complex, and there's a wide variety of principles and recommendations. So what they did was like deconstructing the charter and giving us the principles, and we had to sort them in the way we think that a city would be most likely to be able to adopt them. And that way, maybe, instead of actually reading the charter by principle, reading it recommendation by recommendation. So that way, I think we could create like I think the idea of a pipeline is interesting. Like we cannot go from zero to everything in one go. Maybe we have to go step by step and saying, this city is interested in adopting the charter, so maybe there should be like a preface where they are endorsers of the charter, and maybe then go beyond that gradually. So I think maybe one of the ideas that we've had is during next year, maybe we will organize focus groups with cities around the world that may be interested in adopting the charter and others that have adopted the charter. So we can play the same or do the same exercise and really understand what the charter is asking cities to do and in what order. So thank you very much for the dynamic.
Great. So if somebody now wants to know more about the charter, where do they find out more information and who do they contact?
opendatacharter.net, or just come to me. Or Antonio.
Okay, great. So the third one, which one was the third one? All right, you. Great.
Thanks. So we were the competitiveness and economic development table or group. So just to preface it, I think a lot of times people in the open data community like to talk about economic development and competitiveness and jobs, which is great, but what does that actually mean in terms of open data in cities? It means creating new jobs. It means actually building companies or optimizing them and scaling them. And so a lot of times there's a disconnect between what it takes to build a company or optimize operations and then the policymakers saying, yes, we need economic development. So at the Center for Open Data Enterprise, we developed this thing using the business model Canvas, which we actually make policymakers walk through. If you are going to fix a problem in your city or in your state or in your region, and you were supposed to think about it through the business perspective, how would you do it? So this is the exercise that we used for this session. And I really asked people, okay, what's the problem? And don't just tell me that unemployment is a problem. What's the root problem? So I made people say, answer 5 whys, getting down to the root problem. We then had people do high concept pitches. So a lot of times when people explain their idea, it takes 5 minutes, and by then you're not really paying attention. So a high concept pitch is when you say something like, I'm gonna create the Facebook for dogs. Okay, that doesn't make any sense, but you know what I'm talking about if I say I'm creating the Facebook for dogs. So all of the people at the table created a high concept pitch in something that they would solve in their city. So Roberto has a really exciting pitch that he wants to talk about from our session.
A big hand to Laura Manley for an excellent session. So I am Roberto Corsini. I'm the community manager for open data, working for the 3 largest cities in Finland, Helsinki, Espoo, and Vantaa. I work for the 6-city strategy that you may have heard of. And here comes our high-focused pitch. So we wish to create a Tinder for data. We focused on the problem that exists between the data owners not knowing the value of the data they sit on and the potential data users not knowing what data exists. You've all faced this problem, right? Our Tinder is kind of a metadata portal that not only has the metadata of already open data, but also has the metadata of the data in closed vaults of the data owners. Therefore, the Tinder for data functions as a matchmaker between the data owners and the potential data users. The Tinder for data helps the data owners understand the value of their data and to prioritize the opening of the data and the process therein. It helps potential users discover not only open data, but data that could potentially be opened if a good enough value proposition is made to the data owner, thus increasing communication between the data owners and those who wish to wildly ride the data through the Tinder of data. Thank you.
Thanks. That was great. Excellent. Any other thoughts that came out of that session that people want to share? I feel like that's not working. So let's just keep going with those presentations. Richard, who's presenting? You are? Yeah. All right.
How do you follow the Tinder of data? That's is it like swipe right for PDF? Grindr. Yeah, there you go. So we had a general discussion. I think we're starting to journey with these ideas of smarter, resilient cities. And so we thought it would be it was hard to define these, or that there was a common definition, or why they were bundled together. So first thing we did is start talking about some projects that were happening around the group. Heard some amazing things about the mayor's office in New Orleans, tracking police, a lot of police data, humanitarian open street maps in Nepal and Chennai. And through this, we developed 6 key questions that we wanted to journey with in terms of smart and resilient cities. And so the questions that were coming up were, is open data crucial to a smart or resilient city, and why and how? And then what we did is, with these 6 questions, is break into small groups and start to discuss some of the high-level ideas. We didn't think we were going to get to the end point in that session, but I think it would be interesting to discuss some of the kind of key points that came out of these, and then see what people in the room think. So obviously, being in this crowd, we had a positive response to this first question. And we said it's crucial that for accountability and participation, accessibility and social inclusion. And so I think there was like a concept that a smart city is only a smart city when it's open, and especially because it drives the ability for transparency and inclusion across the city. And then that in implementing open data and building a smart city, obviously there's the technical needs, but what's really important is to be citizen need-centric, so come from a user point of view. The second question is, that came out of the session is, what are the differences between a smart city and a resilient city? And so we found more similarities and differences. But I suppose a high-level summary is that smart cities tend towards more of the technical, whereas resilient cities tend to more of the cultural. But both are talking about how a city can lead to being a happy city, which I kind of really liked. It's quite a simple concept, but how does the city become a happy city for all in it? And then what role does the user needs play in the implementation of smart or resilient cities? So there was a big debate in this about who's responsible for implementation, what sort of implements are needed by government and other players to implement. There's consensus that there is an overall responsibility with government, but that without participation it's pretty meaningless. And so like the public consultation is really key, and then a very government-centered approach wouldn't work, which then led into the second kind of discussion, which is, so who's actually responsible for implementing a smart city in terms of the key role players and their roles. And then there was 2 divergent points of view. One was being that the mayor sets vision, the city government and the budget office and the CEO leads the projects that they implement and bring other users in, so sort of top-down or inside-out approach. And the other was that companies and citizens actually have the needs, and they drive the cases which then incite government to act on them. There was a discussion about the nature of the city and how that would implement on it, but I think that's an interesting, it's interesting to think about, so it would be interesting to hear some views from those who are currently implementing these. And then there was also a discussion of the key role players being citizens, governments, companies, scientists. Talking to situations of countries in need, ones where there are not capacity or resources. Another key, one of the 6 came out, was how do we build resilience in countries that don't have the resources. So in other words, it's useful to have a sensor, it's useful to have information systems, but if you can't act on them because of lack of capacity or resourcing, that's not useful as well. And so there's a big role for capacity building, and how do we enable, so in measuring level of vulnerability and knowledge of what needs to be done, and what is the resilient city, so who are we trying to protect, which people, infrastructure, natural environments, and then how do we build communication strategies between these different role players to address capacity problems. And then the final question we came out with is, are there standards that can be applied to resilient and smart cities? And there was a big discussion about how to have the transference of research and kind of these standards into user context and context for the city. So I think this is really key because there's a lot of one of the key things that seems to be driving confusion is that a lot of these concepts are used in branding different initiatives, either by corporates or otherwise, and so there is a lot of confusion around what these are and how to simply implement as a city and what steps need to be taken. So yeah, I think that's a summary of the session.
Great, thank you. Eric, Caitlin, who's up? You guys. Tag team? Yeah. Sure.
So I'm going to hold and Caitlin's going to read at the beginning.
Okay.
The first thing that we did, we had the worst name. We tried to make it sexy, but we changed the name.
Yeah, we had someone who writes for Hallmark. So we went from, what was it, interdisciplinary collaboration and organizational change to culture change for common understanding, which is, you know, that's nice. So the three key takeaways, and we just kind of had a long discussion and just kind of sharing different experiences. But the three key takeaways were start with the challenge, creating common context, and actively create and maintain feedback loops.
So each of those was really important because a lot of our discussion was about civil society organizations interacting with each other and then interacting with government, and not necessarily all at the same time. And so what we thought was really important was first to start with a common challenge that first goes across sectors, not even across disciplines, just across sectors, public, private, nonprofit, even if you're working on the same challenge, often not talking and working together. So first, identifying that common area where everybody can benefit was really critical for our discussion. And then second was building on that was creating a common language and context. Often we have conversations across disciplines, across sectors where we think we know what the other person is saying and we actually don't. And asking explicitly, defining norms, defining terms, and doing all that together in a collaborative space often requires a convening entity, we discovered, but often is really, really valuable to doing the third thing, which is actively creating and maintaining feedback loops. So if you're gonna work with other organizations, you need to come together and talk and then do something and then come together again and talk about what happened, as opposed to just doing something and ending. And so we talked a lot about how we can facilitate those kind of conversations as civil society organizations, and also Amin was our token government representative in the group, and so it was really good to have his perspective as well. And then at the bottom, we each wrote some kind of things that we can do in what Amin, I'm gonna steal his term, the short order, which is from 1 day to 1 year. So from 1 day to 1 year from now, we have some commitments that we all made to have within the group, and I think it really revolves around this idea of common language. So that was kind of the big takeaway from our group.
Awesome. Sierra, fiscal transparency.
So, yeah, come on up. Come on, there we go, come on. Cool, thanks guys. Okay, so yes, our group was Fiscal Transparency, and we started off our session by really just sharing all the different types of work that each of us is doing with regard to fiscal transparency in cities around the world. And taking all of that into consideration, there was just so many different aspects to it, as you can imagine. So we decided to shrink the problem and talk about a particular user group and what kinds of problems they might face with respect to fiscal transparency, and then discussed some possible solutions to that. So the group that we chose was entrepreneurs. So the problems that we kind of captured was that from the perspective of entrepreneurs, small business, et cetera, they might find it hard to access the different types of information that they could need. And these types of data might include, actually, let me back up. When we were thinking about the ways that entrepreneurs work with fiscal data, it's important to break it up a little bit as well, because entrepreneurs are people who are working with cities and working in cities. So kind of thinking about that distinction there, and then they're, average citizens at the same time, so they have, the citizens' interest in the value of their tax dollar as well. So these kind of touch on all of those cases. So again, they might find it hard to access the information that they need, and that information might include bid criteria, budget information, tax rates, and then relevant financial benefits for them to do business. That might include also lack of information on various types of tax incentives, payment schedules. We also learned that when doing business with governments, that contractors often are waiting 4 months or more to be paid by the government, which this might be okay for a really large company, but a small company may not work for them. So this kind of, at least the awareness is important before they go down that road, and this also opens up a conversation around different types of programs that might be able to address that problem. And then being able to navigate opportunities to work with the government, with the city, and then simply being new to the market, just getting oriented. What are you supposed to do if you want to start a business or if you have recently started a business? So those are some of the challenges that we identified. And then Ramiro, maybe you can share the solutions that we talked about.
Okay, thanks. I'm awful at this. I'm only here because Sierra told me not to be a baby about talking in public. So I'll try to do my best, right? My name is Ramiro. I'm in charge of the Open Government and Innovation Department in the city of Buenos Aires. So nice to meet you all. We were lucky that we had in our team an entrepreneur, and she guided us through her main concerns. So we worked as well in what we consider would be good solutions for her and for everybody, right? So first of all, the main problem is when starting a business, what is it that you need, the information that you need? What's the paperwork that should be needed for creating maybe a society or accountants? And how much does this cost? I mean, what's the cost of it? And what will be the cost if your business scales up? That information is not upfront when you start your business, and that should be provided by the government. Second of all, what's the government spending in? I mean, we're talking about government procurement, and we should know what are the business lines that I, as an entrepreneur, should focus on. What's the government spending, and what's the budget, and what's the actual execution of the budget? After that, we made focus on taxes. What are the taxes that I have to pay for my particular business? That information should be there. And do I have any benefits for the type of business I'm facing? Do I have their particular benefits in the different zones than the one that I am? And are there exceptions for the business I'm facing? If there are certain exceptions, that should be there. And lastly, the business trends. I mean, what has the government been spending for the last years? Is there some new trend? There's long and short-term trends. Is there something new that I'm not seeing that I can have an opportunity there that the government is spending? And seasoning as well. If I'm an entrepreneur, I don't have the business or the operations capacity for facing different seasoning on the city. When it's spring, I have to focus my business on something, and summer, maybe some other. So providing that information for an entrepreneur is like, it's an advantage with its competitors, and we're not doing it, and we should.
Hi, I'm Anna for Mexico City government, and I think one of the insights that we share in this group is that it's a discipline that open contracting is for everybody, not only for entrepreneurs, but also for regular citizens, because we all pay taxes, we all want to have a better quality of life. And we as public servants, both Sierra as civil society and our colleague as an entrepreneur, we're discussing about this topic really passionate, because at the end, we are all impacted by the decisions of how the government procure all the services or all the things that matters to these 5 stages. So we encourage you to go to the webpage of OCP to see what is the initiative about. and to get involved, because engage is one of the more important parts of this process, and we need collaboration and participation for every one of you. You're expert in government, in civil society, or a regular citizen. You must understand that these changes can actually solve lives not only for you or for your community, but globally. So we encourage you to visit the webpage, and thank you for all your attention.
So this is amazing serendipity, but everything that everybody just said, we talked about in our group as well. But we talked about it in the context of a very specific problem. My name is Greg Bloom, and I'll talk a little bit about this problem that we work on in the Open Referral Initiative. There we go. And this is Angelica. Okay. So the issue is that it's very difficult for people to see the safety net, by which I mean the resources that we make available for people in need, health, human, and social services. The question is, which organizations provide what services to whom? Where are those services accessed? How do you access them? And we had a small group that talked about how this problem shows up in all kinds of ways. When people are in need, you might turn to Google and you don't find very reliable information, as opposed to restaurants or other businesses. When it comes to the services that are available to people in need, it's very difficult to find and trust information on the web. And that's partially because there's a lot of different information resources out there, but they're all produced in isolation from each other. You might have a call center in your community. You might also have a social worker who maintains a written binder of services that they refer people to. There are probably web applications that you might find on Google, but everybody is maintaining this information in silos. Organizations themselves might not have incentives to be found by more people. And so what we have is a scattered landscape of information that isn't very trustworthy and is often not up to date. This information is public about nonprofits and government agencies, and it should be available as a public good. We've sort of heard from that in many different groups already today. It should be ecosystemic, available through many different channels. So we did talk about this vision. Ideally, you could show up wherever you might happen to go, to a website or a doctor's office or a hotline, and you could be able to get information about any different service that might be able to address your need. And so even just in our group, we had a bunch of different examples. Angelica can share just from her own work, just one possible use case.
Hello, I'm Angeliki. I work in Vienna in the design of e-health systems. So on the one hand, as we discussed, like the bureaucracy and especially the health system is kind of a maze and inaccessible by users like older people who cannot Google well or make good queries and use the internet as we do. And on the other hand, in my work, EU pours a lot of funds every year to fund projects for older people, ICT projects like develop smart algorithms, use top-notch technology and sensors, etc. But all this is not really connected to the context. How is this top-notch technology is going to be accessed by users? So there is no plan for this, there is no integration, and the conclusion is that without realizing all this, as you said, the landscape, the institutional landscape, it's futile to think about technology because it will be inaccessible.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have an example in this case of software that's produced by government and health institutions to help people stay healthy. Part of staying healthy is getting your needs met, finding a lawyer if you might be evicted, finding care for your ailing parent. And so ideally that software produced for a particular purpose of keeping someone healthy would be able to access the same information as your local administration office, your hotline, and so on and so forth. So the question of what this should be, this infrastructure, however, Open Referral is not trying to build the app that everyone will use. What we've developed is a common language that everybody's app can recognize. And then we work locally with civic institutions and governments and community partners and technologists to find local solutions for sharing this information. Whether that's one organization that collects all the information for its community and publishes it so that many organizations can then redeliver it to their users, or whether it's some sort of federation like what we see here. So here are some examples of open source applications that already work with this format. Here's one that was developed in Boston by the Boston Children's Hospital. Here's another one that was developed in San Francisco by Zendesk. And this one was developed by Code for America in San Mateo. They're all different ways of showing the same information. They can all deliver the same information simultaneously, and they're only the tip of the iceberg. And these already work. This is open source software that you can redeploy. The question is, who's going to maintain all the information? And to answer that question, we have to work with, just like we said, across disciplines, across sectors, bringing people together to figure out what is the institutional landscape in their community, and how can they work across government and nonprofit and funders to find the answer to how this information will be made available as a public good. So that's a very, very brief summary of our work. You can reach me at Gregish. You can also find the initiative at open_referral on Twitter or openreferral.org. Thank you to Angeliki. And to the organizers of this event. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, last but not least, standards.
So we are using top-notch technology, as you can see over here, just to explain what we have been doing. So we wanted to disentangle a little bit the standard soup that we have now in terms of open data and open cities. And then we realized very quickly that there are obviously many standards, as it has to be with the standardization world. But what we have been trying to do is identify challenges and things that we can work on the future, on the next months, on the next years, in order to be like providing better service for our citizens. So on the one side, we have the ISO 37120, sorry for the numbers, that is actually like talking about indicators that allow us to understand how our cities are performing, which are the main places where our cities should improve, and which are those cities that are performing better than us, so that we can actually ask them and see what to do with them, yeah? So that's focused on indicators. On the other side, we have bottom-up strategies, bottom-up initiatives that have been going on. And one example is that one on the corner over there, which is the Spanish technical norm on open data for smart cities, which is a UNE, which means technical norm for Spain, and that we are now moving and promoting up in other standardization organizations. And there is also another initiative called Ojo al Data 100, which is actually focusing on trying to identify the 100 data sets that every single city should provide in their open data portal. This is based on bottom-up participatory approaches. So first challenge that we have identified as challenge 2 over there is that we need bottom-up participation. We are really willing to start. This is very much work in progress, where we are thinking about those data sets. We have an initial catalog, very biased towards Spain in that case, but I mean, what we really need to see is whether this could be also going into other countries, which are the differences, which are the data sets that make sense, which are the ones that do not make sense, and actually have a proper community around them and focusing on single data sets so that we can compile all those data structures that could become standards. Open 211 would be one of those ones, yeah, obviously, yeah. Open contracting would be another one, yeah. Those ones are already identified and they're already working, so not much to do over there. Second challenge is, okay, we have indicators on the top. We have raw data, raw open data on the bottom, yeah. Indicators are very good for cities. Raw data is very good for the cities as well, but also for the companies that want to reuse that data, yeah, and for anybody, any citizen that would make would like to make use of it. So can we actually connect both so that we can get the benefits of producing raw open data from the city's perspective, and at the same time producing those indicators and having a clear methodology of how to produce them and do that work once. So we really think that this is the major challenge that we would like to do in this work in progress. And basically, I mean, this would allow us to aggregate all those indicators that we are trying to provide just actually from the raw open data that also companies can make use of. Yeah? So that's challenge 2, or challenge 1, as we have identified there. And the clear benefits for cities and reusers is, on the one hand, for cities, reduce the burden of providing all these data that all these cities have to provide every now and then on indicators for different types of organizations. And I mean, this really is a burden for those cities that have fewer people working nowadays and that really need to provide those data sets in order to appear on the rankings. And the second thing is that for reusers, it would be the slogan of develop once, but deploy everywhere. So you can actually scale up, yeah? And that's, I think, that one of the challenges that we have currently with our reusers for our open data portals. Okay? So that's all, I think, yeah? Anything to add? Yeah? Okay? So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so before, that was a lot, eh? 8 great presentations. Before we wrap up, I'm going to ask you to go back to the polling app, okay? Sly.do, okay? And we have one question for you, and we're going to do kind of the evaluation of the summit, okay? Using that tool. So if everybody wants to go on that application, the code again for those that have just joined, it's 2001, and this is the app Sly.do. And the question that you'll see there is, what is your main takeaway from the Open Cities Summit? Okay, so let's give ourselves a couple of minutes just to kind of really, reflect on, because now you've been exposed not only to the conversation that you participated in, but then, the 7 others that you missed. So let's try to think through, either it's one takeaway from your own conversation or maybe something else that you heard. And if you don't have a phone, then, you've got paper. So let's use good old paper. So for those who need it, happy to share paper and pens. 2001. 2001. I know. Yeah, it's a bit antiquated, but it's okay. we're going to look at your takeaways, okay? Ooh, all right. Can you scroll down? Cool, looks good. It might be easier if you read some of it from where you are. So you want to pick?
Okay, we have 28. I think we're going to try to be as quick as possible, but the first one is that you can be involved in open data without being a data specialist, a data scientist. The open data is a verb, not a noun. That the main approach of open data is solution-driven. Administration comes up with a problem and relevant data sets are then identified. People are expected to open data in order to promote democracy and transparency, but still it remains unpaid or hard to be paid hobby for a few gigs, at least until now.
Wow, it's amazing somebody had time to type all of that in.
Yeah.
Okay.
These are very long takeaways.
Those are all different, or is that only one?
No, these
okay,
are,
I thought that was one that somebody just wrote.
But these,
I was like, wow.
These are much longer than I expected. So.
Okay. All right, so let's take a few more.
Yeah. The Tinder of data, that was a good takeaway.
Yeah.
Open data experiences are various, and it was good to share with each other. Special thanks for the discussion around open data portals and engagement mechanisms. People worldwide are having similar challenges and seeing similar benefits from open data. We need more institutional capacities for experimentation, learning, and deliberation. Start from a challenge and engage with all stakeholders to create common language that uses open data to solve problems and create shared value. Open city, smart city, resilient city, too many terms that have not concrete definition, makes discussions hard. Open data offices in government should approach open data with a customer service approach. New thoughts, ideas, and inspirations about engaging citizens, developers, and other data utilizers. Need to collaborate more between communities across sectors and experts. Something as local as cities benefits greatly from a global community on the topic of open data. The scale of opportunity in cities is incredible. Lots of great collaborations ready to work.
Well, great. So we're wrapping up right now. This is kind of the main things that we've remembered that caught our attention in our discussion. What could we have done differently? Okay, because last year at the IODC we had a very small discussion that involved maybe 12 different cities, and the background to that is that there was a delegation from Finland that was coming to the IODC, and they wanted to connect with Canadian cities, right? Which was great. And we were, Maddie came to me, and then we said, like, okay, let's organize a side event. Let's use the IODC as an opportunity to convene a group of cities that would be interested in having a conversation peer-to-peer, right? And it was really interesting. It was very short. We had like an hour and 15 minutes, and then we realized that there was like obviously a much broader conversation to have. And this is kind of the background to the event that we organized this year. So let's think ahead to next year. So what are the things that we could do differently to improve either the process, maybe there are themes, maybe the format. I mean, we tried to give you as many diverse kind of formats as possible. I think you noticed that we were shifting around quite a lot. Maybe we did too much of that. Maybe you wanted to have more interactivity, different types of speakers. So let's be honest within kind of, our community, and let's try to identify maybe things that we could work on to make this, because, we don't often have the chance to meet each other and to connect this way. Please.
Is that I did not enjoy too much to write questions on Slido. Like the poll was nice, but we didn't have the opportunity to interact with the panel like an audience and more like text. It was very indirect for me.
Fair enough. Good. Anything else? This was a perfect event? No. Come on. There's always things we can improve here. We can take it. We won't take it personally, No hard feelings. Here we go.
So as this was the Open Cities Summit, there are a lot of us here from civil society and not so many representatives from cities. So to the extent that we can do targeted outreach to city participants, I think that would provide a lot of value to us and to them at the same time. So maybe that's something to think about for attendance and representation.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, no, I mean, earlier, at the beginning of the day, we asked how many people were actually from government or from a city, and I think there was, roughly speaking, maybe 25 hands that came up, which is not too bad, We did try, just to give a bit of background, we did try to connect with mayors. We thought that would be interesting to have a panel with different mayors to be able to talk about kind of the political side of this conversation. And it's difficult to lock down a mayor, right? As we all can appreciate. So maybe with a little bit more lead time, if we feel that this is something that's relevant to this piece, a piece of conversation that we could add to this, then we could plan ahead a little bit better for that. Anything else? Yeah.
I actually wanted to wait a little bit because I thought that I also would give some reflection on the discussion, but I would use those maybe in a way to frame them how to improve the next year one. I think that was a great day. In fact, that I was looking forward to it, and I'm very excited about all the discussions and the conversations. As I said in the morning, we have great opportunity here in this particular field of the openness or open development to bring more diversified groups. And one of the things that I noted here as a main takeaway is that most of the discussions from the keynote all the way until now, they tell me that we need more research, we need evidence. We have some key stakeholders in this field that they will look into the evidence, they want to see some studies. I was very pleased in the morning when our keynote speaker said, Oh, we have a project with NYU research. Oh, we have another project with Columbia University. But more so, I think that having more of the research community, not really the very academics, they might not really come next year, maybe in 5 years they will come. But those who are on the edge of policy research and academic research, they would come. And I think this would give great credibility to the movement. So I would do that. A second takeaway that I really thought about for most of the day, it was from the keynote speech. We still find examples from some people who are either privileged or well-off to use our data. And whenever we go to conferences, we say, oh, this great man, who is a professor or at the university. My main concern about the open cities and the data that we can generate is that I really would like to see the marginalized groups, the least privileged, using it. As our keynote speaker said, we want some people from Harlem or from Brooklyn to use that. And the more I think about it, the more I think, you know what, why don't we just start from the education? This is something very important. In the data revolution, we need to think of not high school, maybe even secondary school and middle school, to teach people about data. In a generation, one generation, believe me, this becomes something natural to us. It's not something that we need to have a movement about the data. So I would like to emphasize that. Maybe next year when we have a session on the intersection of the cities, the urbanization, the research, but also the education. And the last one, I will be brief, is I would like to see myself, and this is my work in the MENA region where I'm based right now, more innovation, more jobs, more creativity, more entrepreneurship, coming out of this. Because this is another evidence, this is another source of credibility for us and motivation for us to show that, it's not really all just, blah, blah, and we're being idealists and philosophical. We're creating jobs. We're bringing startups. We're bringing everybody together. So those were my 3 takeaways. If I don't get the chance to thank you for this wonderful day, I will do it now. Thank you very much. Thanks to the organizers, and thanks for all the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Just to comment on those are all, I think, excellent points. And here, let me share. Oh, great. We've got a few hands. I'll go there and then come to you. We're trying to do a lot with the IODC, right? And so it's interesting that you mention collaboration and to speak about academia, and then at the same time as the Open Cities Summit, there was the event on research, right? And so we're kind of victim of the silos that we're trying to kind of break down in the way that we're trying to have a very ambitious agenda and convening multiple conversations at the same time. But that's a very good point. So we had a comment here and then over here as well. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, I think there was obviously not a lot of time for the panels, but then there was, I think, some attention to diversity, but I think it always needs to be said that the more diversity, the better. Because I do feel like the global north, particularly Europe and America, were overrepresented in those panels, and I think it would be good to have more voices from the global south, Asia, and the Middle East, MENA, and Africa, and for those experiences, because I think the open data, and what open data means, knowing a little bit about crisis mapping and things like that, and what OpenStreetMaps is, how you learn where roads are. It's not, in the first world, it's like, oh, where the Starbucks are, and then the third world, it's like, well, now we know our infrastructure. So I think there's a lot of things about open data in those areas I would like to have probably more representative possible, and definitely more gender diversity as well as race ethnicity as well on the panels.
That was exactly my point. Out of the 10 persons we had this morning, there was 1 female attendant, and
yeah.
that was a bit pity. So, don't want to sound like a broken record, but
point taken. It's not for lack of trying, but that's not a good enough excuse, So we did have a speaker who was supposed to come from Dublin, who was here, but was at a different venue, who was supposed to be there. But that's not an adequate answer to that question. So we can definitely do better, So let's do that. For the moderators, for people who participated in the panels, any kind of final thoughts? Because you guys had a different kind of perspective. Alex, I don't know if you want to share a couple of thoughts here that come to mind. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I just did.
So I've been to a couple of these conferences over the last decade, and one of the things that I always look for is who's here. Do we have people from government in here who are listening? Are there people from industry who have the data, who are scraping it from government, buying it from government, and then reselling it? Are there journalists in the room who actually deal with government officials on a daily basis and can tell you how difficult it is actually to get the data they're requesting? Is there a combination of the freedom of information discussion, the anti-corruption discussions, and the open data discussions? Are people talking about the privacy interests and equities that are involved here? Are we really talking about power and politics, or are those things pulled out of the conversations? The answer to some of these questions is yes, right? Some of these things have come up in the conversations I've been in the panels, that I got to push on a little bit, or maybe not as long as I wanted to. Is there an opportunity to follow up if someone doesn't give a distinct enough answer that follows the same party line? Is there evidence of impact? Is academia here? I see a lot of inspirational work here. I see a lot of people who are deeply enmeshed in the field. I'm sorry I didn't get to speak with more of you to learn more about what you're doing. So I come away from this feeling like there's a lot of potential, like I've learned about different projects and efforts, but I'm still concerned that we're not grappling with some of the deeper issues, and that the people who need to be worried or concerned about this aren't at the table, and that the people who maybe need to know more about what's happening here aren't coming because they're still not concerned about the impact of this work. So I have mixed feelings, put it that way. I appreciate the opportunity always to speak up, and I can tell you that the Sunlight Foundation has had some success in the last decade, not just prying government data out of their hands, but getting laws passed. And that kind of political collaboration, I think, is something else I'd love to hear more about in these discussions too. Administrations come and administrations go, and if you can't lock in reforms, you may not keep getting your data.
Great, thank you. I was listening and taking notes at the same time. Antonio.
All right, just going to say my final words. We started planning this event 15 months ago after the 3rd International Open Data Conference. We started joining the Open Data Charter and created the subnational working group in Mexico, in OGP, in 2015. Since then, we have been trying to bring together this community of specialists, that work with open data and are interested in how open data can be relevant for cities. And we did not know what was going to happen in this event. But we are very happy. I think it has been our first Open City Summit that is going to mark a difference and has given us many ideas, and I think a very interesting network. We have more than 200 people mapped so far, and what we would like to do is actually work more with you if you're interested. I'm talking now from the side of the Open Data Charter. I think that's the channel of communication that I would like to enable for all of you. We have a working group, and we would like to keep the conversation going and thinking about the next International Open Data Conference, wherever it might be. But what we would like to do maybe is like following the exercise that we worked on the Open Data Charter to think more strategically about how cities can use and publish better data. So the door is always open in the Subnationals Working Group and in the Open Data Charter. I would like to invite you all to be part of it, to contribute, to get in touch with me if you want to have, you have ideas or whatever. We need hands and we need ideas. So what we would like to do, this was a first step to start building this community of open cities, and we hope to continue this work throughout the year. So keep in touch. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your ideas. What all this content that you have produced, all the questions that we have asked before this event, we are going to try to compile all that information and put it into the IODC roadmap. So it was not for nothing, so we hope to make the most out of these contributions that you have made, and we are very grateful that you have contributed so much. So thank you all for coming, and we will see you these 2 days at the International Open Data Conference, I guess. Thank you.
Well, finally, I would like to thank you for coming to Media Lab Prado. I do hope you have been in a very good mood with us. And at the end of this event, that we expected to be at 7, we have a cocktail, so we can, well, do a little of networking in the backyard, and then we will try to say to the catering service to do the cocktail as soon as possible. And then after this cocktail, there will be another one. So take it easy. Take it easy, because after this cocktail, we are expecting everyone from other events, pre-events of the International Open Data Conference, from Maredata at the Carlos III University, from the National Library, from Open Data Research, from Data Walk, from Carto and Visuality. Visuality and Yuri Engelhardt are also working in some kind of data visualization with humans, so I think they need our help, our participation, and I don't know how it will be, but I think we will know it as soon as we get to the backyard. And then we usually close at 9. Yesterday was one of our few days that we closed more than 9. It was 9:30, but today we will close at 10:30. So everyone from any other events that if you know, you can let them know that they can come to Media Lab Prado to celebrate this Open Data Week, because I think that tomorrow and the day after tomorrow will be worse. I'm sorry, but if Emma is in a very, long distance place, so far away from here, a no place, nowhere. So thank you very much. I do hope next edition, next year, we can also see you, and hopefully these issues that we have been working will be the agenda of the Open Data Charter and all these organizations. So thank you, Antonio, thank you, Noe, and thank you every organization that has been working for this Open City Summit.
One very last thing. I said thanks to you, but I would like to give also special thanks to all the organizers of this event. So I would like to invite you to the stage so people can see you, Stephen, Caitlin, Jean-Noé, Adolfo, of course, all the facilitators of the working groups, please. And I would like to give a big round of applause because they have been very generous with their time. Special thanks to Jean-Noé and Adolfo, who have been putting this together, and they have been super helpful, and it wouldn't have been possible without their help. So thank you, and please, big applause.